Hi everyone, thanks for joining. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes just while we wait for everybody to jump on. So just bear with us. Hello everyone, welcome to our AI and Finance workshop series. Thanks for joining us. I'm Leo Hewitt, the founder of Core3, and we're a CFO search and finance recruitment business for scaling organizations across the UK. And we're on a mission to build no surprises finance teams that perform under pressure. And a big part of that is AI and how it can take weight off your shoulders so that you can focus on the things that really, really matter within your team and in your business. So a bit of background about how we got here. We've been running events for quite some time now with the finance community, and we survey them before they attend. And the number one theme that comes up time and time again is we understand that we need to get our head around finance, but sorry, AI. Hopefully, you already understand finance, but we just don't know where to begin. There's a lot of theory out there. There's a lot of blue sky sessions that don't really show us practically what we can do day to day. So we went away and we found somebody who can hopefully solve that problem and show you practically how to use tools like ChatGPT and Claude in your finance team tomorrow that can actually save an awful lot of time and hopefully free you up to add more value within your organization. So this is the first of a series. So we're going to be doing them every single month. You would have seen when you registered that there's the first four dates are already scheduled, so you can go and book those for the future. But the topic today is on investor readiness. So how can you leverage GenAI to prepare your business for scrutiny before investors start kicking the tires? And this session is 45 minutes. So we'll allow Peter just to run through some live use cases, demos. There'll be some burning questions throughout, but then there'll be a 15-minute session at the end where you can ask questions for Q&A. So feel free to hang around for that or shoot off if you need to. But without further ado, I'll intro you to Peter Beard. So Peter is ex-Big Four chartered ACA. He is on the board of the ICAEW, and he now helps CFOs and finance directors implement AI best practice into their finance teams. So over to you, Peter.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Leo, and good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all well, and it's a pleasure to see you. And I'm pleased to get on with this session. So, really, for this, well, our focus today is looking at AI for investor readiness and seeing what that looks like from a scaling up finance team. What can we get AI to do from that perspective? And specifically, what can I do as a CFO to get it adopted within my team? There's a bit of background about myself. You'll have this deck afterwards, so you'll have this for your reference as well. Just some of the customers we've worked so far this year with, including the ICW themselves, and recently worked with Disney and Activision. So we've got these on here, but for the moment, I kind of just want to go straight into today's session. We're going to focus on three tools. So that is Claude, ChatGPT, and Copilot. Today, the key reason being is that they're extremely functional and extremely intelligent, and they're also very well paired up with Excel. Really, really key for finance teams. The majority of using Excel. So we're going to be focusing on those three today. I'm going to show you how your experience with the tools in AI that you use are extremely correlated with how you talk to them and as well how you interact with the buttons that you press. And so how we talk to them is actually a really important thing, much like knowing formulas in Excel. If you don't know formulas, it's quite a rubbish product, Excel. So this is why I'm going to show you how you do that best practice for finance and accounting. And this has been devised and developed with the ICAW with them as their go-to framework. Guidance and best practice from a finance perspective. If I'm adopting this for my scaling up finance team, what does that look like? We're going to go into our live demos. What your auditor expects from an investor readiness perspective. This is a key component, including your controls, your process, and your IT configuration. So we're going to walk it through that, or what that looks like at the top level. If you have burning questions from that, we'll have chance. And as you say, if you have specific questions, do reach out. Looking at emerging releases and risks, what are new things coming out that you need to be mindful of using these technologies from the latest features, and with a Q&A at the end. Says silo here. I think we just do it on Teams. So if you want to come off camera and come off microphone, please do so at the end. Okay, so without further ado, so we're going to go through the three tools today. At the overall set, you'll find that there are overlaps between these tools. The main thing with them is what you're using them for. What we find at a minimum is that teams at least have a Gemini or Copilot in their business because they're either Google or Microsoft. In addition to that, we expect a good high functioning finance team to have at least 1 to 2 others in addition to Copilot. So a lot of teams we see have a mixture of Copilot plus Claude, Copilot plus ChatGPT, or a combination of all three, because there are functions and features that some have that the others don't. So we're going to walk through what that looks like. Just as a recap, we're looking at the three tools today. These three tools are AI platforms. They are examples of generative AI. They sit within the subset of artificial intelligence. This is quite a common sort of graph to show. It's become part of prominent vernacular right now is because it's not only the scale of the task it can handle, but also the scope of them as well. You would have come across a lot of in your previous days with things like macros and rules-based automations. They can be fantastic when you have a fixed problem that needs to be solved. For example, matching POs or scanning receipts, etc. But as soon as you have exceptions, that's when the macros and automations fail. Generative AI tools are really, really helpful with that because they can handle all of those edge cases and nuances. And that we know that finance is dealt with that long tail of tasks. It's seldom that you have no exception-based reporting or way of doing your accounting and finance. Pricing at a glance. So these tools, by comparison, what you'll find is for your finance team, you need at a minimum a team or enterprise-based plan. Broadly speaking, it ranges between 20 to 30 pounds per month per user, multiplied by the count of your finance team. What you'll find is that you'll probably integrate this within your broader back office or front office strategy with your CEO or with yourself on managing the back office, so including ops, legal, HR, finance, etc. So something to consider. What you'll find is when you do this, you might your first question is, well, who do I give the licenses to? Do I give it to the whole team, just myself? We typically find as an adoption, as a rollout, you have it with the CFO, the finance controllers, and the finance managers first. And then over time, once your juniors are trained up, you then give them free rein over these tools, but with the proper controls in place so that you can make sure that it's well governed and well operated, especially from an auditor's angle who will be looking at how this thing is structured up in your business. So you'll get these quick links. We'll provide these following the event. Okay, so within finance, if there's one thing from here, this is a really kind of at a glance, the things that matter, the things that you should be concerned about when using generative AI. It's all about quality with finance. Finance is built on trust, and this is the equation. This is what drives trust inside of AI tools. It is a combination of the prompts, so the way you talk to it, the data that you provide it. I'm looking at what we really want is we want better quality prompts, we want better quality data. When you pick these tools, we want tools that have, it's not in terms of intelligence, but it's also functional performance. So it might be a really smart model, but if it can't connect to accounting software, is that a limitation for us? So that's something to bear in mind. We'll walk through how you can tell that really quickly with those tools. The other one is looking at the platform. So the functional quality is two things: how the user interacts with it, plus what the platform can or cannot do. That's really all it is. It's as simple as that. You find that some platforms might be better or worse, and you look at that by saying, look, I can get the same output, but for a lot less effort. We would typically want to choose that one. So we'll show you kind of how those three differ with inside. Okay, so for finance and accounting, if there's one thing to take away, this is how you would interact with these tools. It's really saying, okay, this is what's called the facets framework. This is how you communicate with generative AI tools. And you're going to see this in the live demos. So the first one is task. And task is really just saying, what are your verbs? What are your action points? It's to build, it's to analyze, it's to search, it's to research, it's to review. Being really clear in that first word, what you're going to give it. The second one is then audience, saying, look, who is this for? It's for the CFO, it's for the manager, it's for the FC, it's for the finance manager, just being really clear. What you'll find is you'll see some prompt frameworks which say, or act as a senior financial analyst or act as an experienced CFO. From from your professional point of view, we absolutely don't choose that, and that's what the ICW kind of recommends on, is because words like act as senior financial analyst introduce subjectivity. Well, what is a senior financial analyst, or what is an experienced CFO? Versus audience, if you just say it's for the CFO, it's objective, it's factual, it's clear, there's no ambiguity. And the more subjectivity you give these tools, the more you'll find is that they create more varied responses. Sometimes you'll see if you ask the same question twice, it can give you variable responses. It's because the words used are variable. So what we do is we use this framework to constrain that variation. Variation happens because of something called temperature in these tools. It's set between 0 and 1. We can't control that value, but what we can do is encourage it to operate with low temperature, low variation. We want that. In finance and accounting, we want that as much as possible. If we're in marketing or sales, we might want some creative thinking, but for finance and accounting, we really just want it, especially with number handling, we want it to be towards that lower end. And this framework does that. It's been iterated over thousands and thousands of use cases with the ICW. You have your context, so who your business is. Now, in each chat, you might put this in, but what you'll find is when you set this up, you'll have this at the company level. You'll have like company level context, which sits at the top, and that feeds into everybody's accounts within your team. As a CFO, that's something you would be expected to kind of quarterly update or have that kind of master document, which you curate over time. Your example, this is your gold dust right here. By providing, saying, look, I produce a 13-week cash flow forecast in the way that you already like it, by providing that gold standard piece of work paper that you have, and actually enhance it from there. So giving that example really goes a long way. The format is saying, look, is it a PowerPoint? Is it an Excel? Is it a Word document? Is it a journal entry? Is it just text? It's been very clear on that. And then your sources. Sources in a real nutshell, we want them to be primary sources inside of finance accounting. Those are HMRC legislation. Those are IFRS standards. Those are FRS 102 standards. Secondary sources might be something like an official EY report or PwC report, or a high domain authority, high trust report, but that's not a primary source. And then your tertiary is things like, we typically avoid them. You might find things like Reddit posts or Facebook posts. We don't really want to use them for finance and accounting. So we just constrain and define our sources. Example here, just to bring that to light before we go into the demo, of saying, look, well, a week prompt might be, do my management accounts for this month, make it look professional, and be really thorough. Act like a senior analyst. Again, there's a lot of, well, what do the management accounts, should they look like? Which month are you talking about? Make it look professional. Well, what does that actually mean? Really thorough. Again, we're leaving it up to interpretation. What we want to do is just give them very clear-cut instructions on how to do that. And a really good example here is produce management accounts, look for variances above here. It's for the FD. This is the context. Here's and data is your context. So if we have our balance sheet and P&L, this is where we put it in. Here's a previous example. We want it in Excel. We want these are the following tabs that we want. And our sources, well, here's our TB, here's our prior year TB as optional for comparatives, etc. Same task, but this drives it from a horrible experience in the weak prompt to a fantastic experience with a facets prompt. Best practice guidance, what you'll find is for investor readiness, you really want well-documented processes. You can do this. And as you're reviewing these tasks, you want it so that it can be, when you're using AI, you'll find this big shift. You're moving from a preparer to a reviewer. Finance is a function of prepare and review, and really AI is trying to solve and delete that preparation component. So you're just left with review. Honestly, cannot stress that enough. So with that, what we want to do is make it as easily reviewable as possible, get to own the numbers quickly. And we can do that with this. So if there's a formula-driven value, these tools can do them now, which is great. Mark them green. We can say, Claude, when you're making Excel, formula-driven, mark them green. That way it's formula-driven and you can inspect it. Blue fonts for any assumptions data. Red fonts for any kind of human confirmation, i.e. if there's an assumption that you haven't given but it needs, or it's flagged from further review, just kind of mark it out so it's clear what's complete and what's not. again, for a scale-up finance team, this is just good best practice for your working papers and for your AI to understand better. The last one down here is saying no. When we talk to these tools, we always want to say when you're producing an Excel, to include fully traceable Excel formula, fully auditable formula for my review. That's what changes it from a hard-coded Excel where it gives you a spreadsheet to then giving you a proper Excel. You can't distinguish between a person because now you can actually review the work that AI's done and then interject if you need to make edits and then hand off. Best practice here, just for review workflow, again, we'll say this to Claude or we'll say this to ChatGPT or Copilot, is saying, look, once it's ready for human review, mark it green. If it's yellow, it's AI prepared, dark blue, then you mark it as it's been human reviewed, it's for final sign off. Again, just good working practice to get your finance team operating faster. Context, what does that include? Written context, so things like what's the business, what does it do? Reference context, so that's more about not stuff you type, but data you bring in, data you connect, as well as sources. So looking at your trial balance, looking at your prior month, etc. We'll come back onto this, but what you find is the routine tasks you'll want to automate. Here's a quick way if you think it's worthwhile automating. Generally speaking, if you're doing it more than 5 to 10 times a year, something to be automated, and we'll show you how to do that inside of these tools. Okay, so before we go into demos, Leo, did we have any questions on the line?
Haven't seen any in the chat so far, but if whilst you're listening, if something springs to mind and you pop it in the chat, I'll do my best to answer those questions as we go.
Sounds great. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just share screen. Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing screen and I'm going to reshare to show you some tools in action.
We've got one quick question, Peter. Is Google Sheets as easy as Excel to link?
Good question. So for Google Sheets, you would be using Gemini for that. It's very well integrated with Gemini. In terms of linking other context or other data, it can be more trying and difficult with it. I can show that in a moment. Reason being is it doesn't handle well with attaching files. It can create stuff from scratch, but in terms of saying we're using an existing example, it can find it a bit harder.
Thank you. This is probably a big one on everybody's lips. Are there any risks when importing company data into the AI tools?
Oh, really good question. And what we can do is we can answer that now. Let me just share screen onto here. Can everyone see screen?
Yep, got it.
Great. So to answer that question on data, there's a really quick way of checking that is to when you look at those 6 platforms. So again, as a recap, there are Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, and Grok. Those are the big 6, taking 95% of the market. A quick way to check that is if you type in the name. So if I type in, for example, Claude, and I type in the word Trust Portal, this gives you the comfort over around the security of the data that's being used. This is what your IT team, you would expect for them to review and to audit and to check. Inside of this tab here, this then gives you the certifications around the security, around external security and external privacy. So you can see here we have SOC Type 2, ISO 27001, and ISO 42001. Those are the most applicable with regards to finance and accounting. You can see here we've got sub-processes too. If you need that, if you need sovereign AI, just need to understand where your data goes, FAQs. And again, here you can see the system cards. And if you want to request that SOC report, you can do so by putting in your details. And you should be expecting to have that on file for your own finance team from an internal audit perspective, control perspective, and as well from your external auditors will be looking at as well. Again, we can see here, if I type in OpenAI Trust Portal, very, very similar thing. You can see in here, again, we have SOC Type 2, type. We have our ISO accreditation here, and then we also have our GDPR as well. Here it just has a bit of social proof saying who else is it trusted by. And if we want to access reports, we can do so by pressing on them. We can then download, view them like so. And then here is the third-party auditor's report of that IT systems.
And Peter, am I right in saying that the security really comes into its own in how you set up your own sort of team-based licenses, enterprise licenses to change the settings so that it doesn't learn from your data and things like that?
Yes, really good question. So I'll put an example here. So this is Claude. This is a team license of Claude. Again, it's you set this up as an organization. What you find within here is that there is a settings button. And the difference between, people always ask me, well, what's the difference between a free and a paid? And it all comes down to, if I just share it one moment in here, and it all comes under, yeah, okay. So one of the big differences and the main difference between the free and the paid, or the pro and the team license, is this tab privacy. You'll see this quite sort of unassuming looking button. With a free plan, you've got this button that says help improve Claude. Now with a team license and enterprise, you can turn this off. With a free, it's not something that you're able to turn off, and it trains from that data. So there's something to turn off straight away. It's absolutely this button, and you want to be able to check for that inside of the tools, including OpenAI. Copilot by default doesn't. That's part of your existing service agreement. So that's already ring fenced. But again, you just want that confirmed by your IT admin, as that sits within the administrator level. Okay, so without further ado, let's go into it. So we have Claude and ChatGPT here. We'll have Copilot as well. One of the big use cases we find with those in scaling up finance teams is looking at how do we get our live reporting? How do I get rolling forecasting, and how do I get that? So what we're going to do is we're going to get that loaded. Now, what you'll want in your team is so that facets framework, how do I get that? How do I turn it? You can either do that yourself. An easier way of doing that, and this is something you set centrally as the CFO, is having a prompt improver inside of your company. You have this, and this basically says, look, we'll take in a prompt, we'll turn it into the facets. If there's any missing data, it will ask you. So let's do that. So what I'm going to put here is I'm going to say generate a 13-week cash flow forecast based on the current sales and purchase data for good office supplies, which is our demo company for today.
And luckily, you don't need good spelling for Claude either, do you?
No, exactly. You can see here, you can be quite lax with your draft, and then it will be able to comfortably handle it. Just out of here, so if I paste that in. So you can see here, it's gathering the thoughts. It's going to be right there. It's going to demonstrate that. It's going to think about it. So then what we can do here is it's then understood, and we can see, look, okay, it's partial, it's missing, it's partial, it's missing, it's missing. It'll then add clarifying questions on this. And this is what you expect to have from a finance perspective, is then having that. So what I can then do here is then say, actually, I'm going to provide it with that example data. I'm going to give it the purchase data. I'm going to provide it with the sales data as well within that period, sales transactions, and I'm going to provide it the TB for the moment as context. And I'm going to just say for this one, for demo purposes, produce the facets prompt. Now, again, what you would do in real life is you would answer those questions inside, so it gives it the context it needs. Once it's done, though, once it's made, though, this is then something you keep. You just have it one time, and I'll show an example here once we're done of what you would do for a task that you're doing more than 5 times a year. Just going to think through that. It's then going to have a look. It's then going to understand it. So it's understood. Here's the company. Here's the year end. Here's the data that I've been provided. It's then going to produce it. So it's now going to build it using that prompt framework. So again, what we're going to do is going to read through that. Of course, we're going to review it as the astute accountants that we are. We can see the examples inside, format with the calculations and the sources, like so. Now, what I would do is if I'm doing this multiple times in a month or multiple times a year, I would create that into a project. A project is a folder. You have this inside of Claude. You also have this inside of ChatGPT. You also have this inside of Copilot, like so. Under Copilots, they treat them as libraries or agents. So you'd create an agent out of that. If I wanted that prompt improver, I'd create that agent inside and I'd call it prompt improver, like so. What I would do is then you'll receive these instructions after this session. So don't worry on that. Inside of here, what I would call it is then call it a 13-week cash flow forecast. Inside here, I'd provide a description to say, what data do I need? Now, this is a really important other security thing from your team. So we talked about external security. How do you make sure you're secured against outside threats? But the other one is also inside security as well, making sure that only the right people have access to the right projects, the right folders. Treat projects like folders. And so with this one, because it's cash flow, I'm going to keep it private versus having it visible to the whole company. When it's visible, it means everyone can see the chats inside and as well make edits to them. We wouldn't want to do this in some areas, for example, with payroll, where you could see other people's payroll information. That should just be for the payroll team. Equally, what you can do as well is just set up a payroll organization so that everyone within payroll can see it, but nobody from the outside. So what I would do is I'll take those instructions, that facets framework, and what I'd do is I'd put it in the instructions here. This means, well, then what I can do is then just update in here, add our files. What I would put in is our trial balance. I'd put in our purchase, I'd put in our sales. You might also put over relevant data. And then what you can then just say is then run for the latest data. So then what you find immediately, this is where your ROI happens. Not only is it going to do the task for you, but also now this is when you get automation. You have your static instructions. As a CFO, you're expected to curate and update these over time. And then inside of here, then you get that information to be ran. So what we're going to do is then run it. We'll also get this done in ChatGPT as an example. So I'm going to open that project. I'm going to call it the same thing. So 13-week cash flow forecast. I've also put number coding here. Again, for managing your finance team's chats, managing their projects, you'd expect them to be coded. A bit like GL accounts, it might be that 100 codes are reconciliation projects, 200 codes are FP&A, 300 codes are for payroll, 400 is for forecasting, etc. That's just a best practice standard that you'd expect.
Just out of interest, Peter, if you linked these projects to one of your OneDrive folders or Google Drive, and could you then run a task so that it automatically does it on a weekly basis without you even prompting it?
Really good question. So it comes down to, as long as it can access that live data, yes, you can. And the way to do that is if I go into the project here, let's open up. If I duplicate this one moment inside. Oh, let's go back. If I go into that project, project inside of here. So then what you would do is under your project setup, so edit details, files within here. This is when you can have your Google Drive. So then saying, look, you then connect it to your live data inside, like so. And then what we can then do is then edit that project so that it can gather from that information. We can do so by adding connectors over here. So if you have your Google Drive, if you have your OneDrive, with Claude for Team, you have access to Office 365, so it can connect directly to your SharePoint, Teams, Outlooks, calendars, etc. So this is how you would access it. So within here, what I would do is create that 13-week cash flow title. There we go. We've created it. And people ask us a lot of the time, which models do you use inside of these platforms? Generally speaking, you choose the best one, which isn't Pro. Pro is the one that takes like 20 minutes to 30 minutes to answer. The main trade-off is speed and quality. For most finance tasks, thinking is sufficient. You want a reasoning model, that's the highest performance. Pro is really just left for those kind of big questions like, should I buy my business, sell my business, or highly strategic type questioning. So we're going to do that. And then what we're going to do in here is inside of that project, and then going to paste in those instructions.
Another quick question while that's loading, Peter. Can you link it to a data warehouse like AWS Redshift so it pulls the data from that?
Really good question. So you would have to find out on the marketplace. The way you find that out quickly is there's something called connectors. Connectors does two things. Connectors are read and write. So when you read information, it pulls it from another system, and write is when it sends an affects change in another system. You hear the word agentic AI, and it can be heavily over marketed sometimes, and it can be a bit fluffy. Really what it just means take action. And so the write function of connectors is the agentic component. So inside of here, what I would do is go on connectors. I then go on manage connectors. If I wanted to check that, what I would do is add a connector and browse them. And then you can search for that area like so. So you can see here, there's different houses, for example, Box, there's Dropbox inside, there's OneDrive. You also can connect to accounting software. So for example, NetSuite and Xero. Inside of here, if we search for AWS, for example, you can connect the AWS API via an MCP or through the marketplace.
Great.
See how that project's doing. It's just loading up. And then what we'll do inside of here is we'll add those files. So we'll put it in here with our sales transactions, purchase transactions. Like so. And I'm going to enable, because of our time, just put on standard for the moment. We'll encourage extended thinking. The nice thing is those when we're doing this, we can run multiple in the background. So let's do that. So whilst this one's running, we'll put it over here. The nice things with this is that you don't have to have one tab and look at it and wait for it. You can run multiple tabs in parallel. And this is where your ROI really benefits. So from here, what I might just do as an example is I might have my management reporting. I might have my trial balance and I need to do an ad hoc reporting, for my investors and getting ready for that. So what I might do here from here, I'll use my facets framework. For this one, I'm just going to show the example quickly and say, from this trial balance, produce a PPTX file of the results in a 6-slide format for my investors. And then with this, ensure it is on brand with the business, business profile. So again, this is where if you want to actually on brand, you can attach. So you might have a fonts, colors, etc. that your marketing team has. Ask that for them, and then you can have that baked in. So it produces the Excels the way you like them, the PowerPoints the way you like them. This one here, I'm just going to put in the annual report, gives a sense of the branding inside. And then we can get that running. So whilst that's loading, it's going to go through those use cases now. It's going to understand. It's going to read that skill. So whilst it's doing that, let's start another one. So another really good use case that we see a lot of the time is for a scale-up finance team, you're dealing with a lot of GLs. You might have multiple entities. How do we handle that? So reconciliations can be a big one, as well as aged of receivables analysis and payables analysis. So what I might do within here is I might have my aged accounts and I might have my customer master data. Now you can see I'm downloading and uploading Excels. With connectors, you don't need to do that. You just need to say, look, find it from my drive or find it from our center or find it from my accounting software directly, get that connected up. So then from there, you can then just pull it straight on. So I'm going to open up the prompt improver like so.
Just had a thought on like access with that, Peter. If you've connected it to your whole 365 or OneDrive ecosystem, and then let's say a junior member of staff asks it, "Oh, show me the payroll data for for so and so? Would it share sensitive data for different roles that you wouldn't necessarily want to share?
Really good question. So when you set up the connector, each individual has to set up. So you can set up connectors at the organization level or at the user level. So for good control, you'd set up at the user level, and what that means is that when they try and connect to the accounting software, they'll get the same level of permissions as they do under that other instance within that accounting software. So if they had 0, but they could only see, for example, transaction data, but they couldn't see payroll data, their permissions would copy across in the connector.
Right.
So providing, and the main thing, as long as you get your permissions right and the other system, it will then copy those permissions across. And if you don't have permission, it will try and read it, but it will just be blocked. The way you can prove that and the way you can see that is you can see inside. So if we take DocuSign, for example, as a really kind of sensitive one that you might have with customer contracts, when you set up a connector, you'll see these components down below, like what permissions am I going to grant? So you can see here, if I want it to get account, you can set for always allow, needs approval, and then blocked. So as the admin, users can't affect this, but the admins can. For read only, typically what we find is that if it's the right team member, it won't affect change. So reading's fine, doesn't need permission, is what we can see. But again, this is up to your, from a control perspective, this is where you can instill needs approval. So every time it does it, or if you don't want to give access to that function, that's where you block it inside of the connector. So from a control perspective, this is where you sort it. And then for write, at minimum, you always want needs approval. That's where it affects change somewhere else. So for example, posting a journal entry, editing master data, etc., and pulling that through. So with that in mind, let's lay that in here. I'm going to go into the prompt improver, and I'm going to say customer aging analysis with recommendations for the provision based on accounting policy, and as well recommendations on chasing those overdue payments. Fully traceable Excel formula for my review to ensure accuracy and completeness. Those are the two big trigger words that auditors love to see, and produce validation checks. So when you're producing Excel, you always want to have validation checks. These are like pass-fail rules. Like, does the sum of the rows that I gave it equal the sum of the count of the rows that have come out? And if it passes, yes. And if it doesn't, fail, need to investigate.
Got quite a few questions that are quite specific on does X connect with Y. Is it best just to check, does each one have its own marketplace where you can search for what connectors are set up on the various different platforms?
Yeah, really good question. So you can discover these through the connectors, through their marketplaces. So you can go inside of here and then see what's available. Each of them has their own kind of sort of like shopping where you can go look for them. And then from there, if you can't, so some are plug and play, some are in the marketplace, which are plug and play and easy connectable. And some others do need custom configuration where you have to get some coding involved and get it set up, particularly with less popular softwares or ones which are smaller. The thing you're looking for is the word called MCP. If it doesn't have an MCP connector, you can make one. It's a totally solvable problem. It just needs a IT configuration specialist setup, and that's one of the things that we do within the business. So we can see here, I'm going to say it's here. I'm going to say make facets prompt for demo purposes. Let's see how the cash flow is doing whilst we're waiting. Okay, so we have our investor presentation example. This was the annual report that we gave it to give it a sense of branding. What we can do here is then download it as a PowerPoint. So let's then take a look. It's just going to load up. If you can see the PowerPoint, Leo.
Yeah.
Great. So this is a highlight here. In the space of a couple minutes, what you do is you give it on brand. It's given the key performance highlights in here. It's given the statement of comprehensive income, financial position, cash flow summary, outlook and strategic priorities. Now, what you'll find is it will try and make some based on its understanding of the numbers, but you might have other context that you want to bring in. A really good example of this is then having meeting transcriptions, really rich context that it just doesn't know about. You can get that connected as well inside of these tools like Claude, for example, or ChatGPT. The way you do that is if you go onto your connectors, again, manage connectors, and you want to find a connector which can connect up to your meeting transcriptions, whether that's through M365, which has transcription note taking, which then goes into SharePoint, or another one for example, like Fireflies, which is AI transcriptions. And you can say, look, can you enrich this PowerPoint based on the meetings I've had in the week talking about the commentary? This is where your meetings plus the context from the TV plus AI brings it all together. And that's where you get from the 80% done to 100% done. So again, and see here, you can see those slides. Close those. Those continue. So if we're within here, we've got our prompt. It's going to make them inside. And what we're going to do inside of here is then paste that prompt in. I'll just paste it so we can all see it. And that's how we'd run it. So what we can see here is, interestingly, the cache flow one, it's taking a little bit longer, but that's fine. That's normally because, there we go. It's now being produced. So what we can do is then download and then have a review.
It'd be interesting to see the traceable formula in this one, Peter, if you've got it.
Yeah. So what we can see here is we have the first tab, which is the assumptions tab. So again, if it's a hard-coded value, it's marked at blue. You'll expect those to be hard-coded like you can see here. And then straight from here, this is where your full traceability comes in. So it's a green valued cell. We know it's formula driven. And then what we can then do is understand it. And then if it's formulas, and if we want to verify it, what you can then do is do control plus left square bracket, control plus left square bracket, or command and left square bracket. And that can show you what assumption drove that value. So this is suddenly where you get comfortable. The second one is also validation checks. This is the absolute gold dust for finance and accounting. Of saying, look, has it passed or failed my quality check? The validation checks are like your review checklist. Does the opening cash equal the TB value? Yes, passed. Does the opening debtor equal what I've put in? Yes, passed. If there are failures, this is where you would pick it up, and these are your minimum checks. Now, what you'll find is at the start, you'll just say add validation checks. You probably won't know what you're looking for to begin with. That's absolutely fine. Get Claude to be creative with it, or come up with some. And then over time, as a CFO, this is where in your control documentation, you put down, okay, these are our review procedures. This is what we do. These are the checks. And over time, you curate them and build them out. So you have a fully specific, and you sit with your team members individually on this and say, well, what review checklists do we need? Have that documented, and you've got a really well-controlled, reliable process to review these outputs. So we can see here, we have our payment data. Then we have our 13-week cash flow forecast. Again, formula-driven values based on the receipts, based on payments. From here, we can see it over week 1 through to week 13 with totals, net cash movement, closing cash balances as well.
And it's only really since sort of December, isn't it, that the likes of Claude have had this type of capability to create real quality with traceable formula.
Totally. So this has only happened since December 19th last year. So you're seeing this today, and this is where it gets extremely exciting now, because it really can get you from that 0% to 85% of the work done, and then you're just left with review. So if I was picking this up, I'd get AI to do the thing, build the product out, have a look at it. The things I'd be looking for is, am I comfortable with so firstly, I'd actually go straight to validation checks. Are there any failures? If there are, go check them and then feed that back to Claude. My second then thing as a reviewer would then be saying, right, I need to go through these formulas, make sure it's mechanically accurate before I then check the quality of the forecast, the assumptions that have been made. And the last thing I would then do is then look to the subjective stuff. It's pulled these numbers out. I'm sure we would have our own. We might put that in the prompt to start with, in advance so it doesn't guess. But then here, this is when I would edit. This is when I would go into my view and then pull this out.
Amazing. Just out of interest, there's been a question, like, what's your favorite tool for Excel modeling?
Really good question. So at the moment, so we work with all six throughout the time. What I like to do is track our active usage across the big six platforms, and then kind of show that as what my most popular one is right now. So in the last 3 months between those big six, Claude has taken about 70% of our company usage in terms of time spent on it as a fraction. So that should tell you kind of an indicator of which one we think is really leading the way so far at the moment.
It also lives inside Excel now, doesn't it, Claude?
Yes, really good point. So with inside of here, if I bring up that Excel again, just one moment. If I download that and then bring that in here, you can see inside. So there are different ways you can roll the dice. You can do it in the web version, what you just saw. You can also do it in the desktop version, but you can also do it inside of the app. So what I can do here is if I said inside and I highlighted the assumptions here, so you can see down the corner, it knows what you're selecting. And if you want to make an edit and just say, look, actually, can I make my assumptions more conservative? So if I said that, make the assumptions more conservative. Inside here. Ooh. And then look, what you can do here is accept all edits or ask for approval. If I'm in finance, I might set approval. For this demo, I'll just say accept them all. So I'll say, right, this individual has then highlighted these cells, or if you said there's something weird in my data, go look for it and pick it out, or change the formatting of it, you can do so. So it's going to read the data inside, understand it. Now I have a clear picture. It's going to go through the structure and then it will update it for you. So you have Claude. What we find is most of the time you do a lot of your work in the web version and then final editing, then you'll do them in line inside that final output. So it's giving suggestions here of what that might be. Those changes like so.
I found this bit really useful because once you've got the output from the web version, then and you want to tweak it or iterate, or you want to add a tab that has a graph or whatever, you can just ask it within Excel itself.
Yeah, so just in this last week, so now all those three have inline versions of this. So Claude has this, ChatGPT does. Currently, it's only available in the United States, Australia, and Canada. This will be coming in the next few weeks to the United Kingdom. It's not accessible at the moment. If you do that, it will just say not available right now. Claude's still there, so we can see that. Yeah, not available in our region for the moment. And then also Copilot has it. It's called the Finance Agent. And so you can get a similar effect with that, like you can see here. We can go back into Claude. Nice thing with Claude is it actually gives you a log of the changes it's made. So it says, look, these are the things I've done. Again, really good from an auditor's perspective. From there, and we can now see the assumptions have now been downgraded to be more conservative. Here we go. So we've got some, as a final one on here, we've got some aging analysis to look at customer payments. Our investors might want us to improve our working capital from this perspective. So again, here, we haven't given it any branding guideline or advice on this. If we wanted to, what you're expected for a company is to set that up as something called a skill. A skill is for, these are available in Copilot, ChatGPT, and Claude. If I go into customize, you'll see this thing called skills. Skills is where you put your kind of design and your preferences for the whole company. So here's an example with the ICAW. You can see here that it's saying, look, this is our logo. These are the fonts that we like. This is the font sizes that we like. This is our color palette. This is the way that we like to write, British English, no M dashes, no emojis, that type of thing. Inside of here, we can then see the dividers. We can then see, our color schemes. These are the color items that we have, like so. These are our primaries, so we can get it looking on brand and really improve the quality of our documentation.
Right, I think we're nearly at time, Peter. Is there anything final you wanted to share before we go into Q&A?
Really good question. Let me just share wrap up on this. So let me present that. Let me know where you can see screen.
Yep.
Great. So to wrap things up, you're auditor expecting that level of documentation. It says, look, when I'm doing these procedures, what did I do when setting it up? What did I do when to get just good control? Just make sure that's documented throughout to say, look, I'm using the facets framework. I'm doing the validation checklist. This is how you bake it into your process. I cannot stress enough, the tools today can do the preparation work. Your experience of them comes completely down to how you talk to them and the buttons you press, such that you'll be left with your preparation work and you'll be left with that review component. And that brings it down from a matter of days or hours of that task down to minutes. So you should just be left with 10 to 20 minutes review, bit of editing, and then you're signing off on that piece of paper, on that work. You'll have this between something called hard controls and soft controls. So your hard controls are things like turning off the data so it can't be trained on, setting up those hard approvals like always allow, approve, or block, physical buttons. Your soft controls are things like, well, I'm using the facets framework, I'm doing validation checks, I have a policy, I have my ethical guidelines in place, etc., to demonstrate. And you'll need both from a finance perspective. To be proactive, to update these things quarterly, update instructions. So you'll have a library that's almost like IP. That's an asset to your business. It is documented processes which the AI uses using that facets framework, and then periodically you improve and update those instructions at the project level. Major releases, there are some that have come out. If you want to talk about them with me, please do reach out. The main thing from here is that they now there's just so many releases that are coming out. It's too much to talk about in this time session, but they are just becoming so much more functional as well as smart, and that's really the big thing with finance. Some just kind of key risks is by not adopting a tool today, we're finding a lot more teams are coming up with data breach risks because now people want them so much they're using them personally and putting company data into a personal, creating shadow AI adoption. So please watch for that. It's actually safer to have a team license and then to not provide that license, we're finding now. And as well as data leakage, always make sure you have at least a team or enterprise license. In terms of takeaway, you will be receiving a full prompt library related to scale up finance and investor readiness with 50 example prompts in the facet framework. You'll get that technique, you'll get the guidance and best practice on that of what that looks like from a human review as well. So you'll have that after that so you can take it back to your team. 3 things to do this afternoon is to kind of pick one prompt and kind of run it with example data or dummy data. Again, until you have that license, just make sure that you have the right one. If you're unsure, please contact and we'll confirm that for you. Identify your top 3 recurring tasks. If you're doing it more than 5 times a year, think about automating it with AI and getting your company context on paper. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you, everyone. If you do have questions, I'd love to hear them.
Perfect. So if anyone needs to shoot off, conscious of time, feel free. But if people want to hang around, we'll stay around for a bit longer. If you've got any burning questions, it'd be great if you could switch cameras on, put your hands up. Let's make it a little bit interactive if you want to ask Peter any questions. But for the rest of you, thank you for joining, and I hope it's been a good session. So who wants to go first?
It's like a hotline.
I know, right? It's pressure. Who wants to put their hands up? I've got one question just whilst we wait here.
Sure. Yeah, if you can come off mic, that's even better. Love that style.
So there's one question around connectors. Can you set at who has access to what connectors at user level to restrict what they can and can't connect to?
Yes, so you can. What you would need to do is effectively the IT person would set it up for them, so that they say, right, well, these users can have access to these connectors. So if you don't want somebody to have a connector, you can actually take it off that user's marketplace, so they can't even connect to it in the first place.
Okay, perfect. Can you ask Claude to build PowerPoints from scratch in the same format as prior reports? And if so, how?
Short answer is yes. What you would do is if I just go into here, if I bring, can you see the web from here?
Yep.
Yeah, so what I would do on here is I would I would go into my project. So if I went into projects like so, and I went into, one second. If I went into my projects, I'd go into my 13-week cash flow forecast. I'd then go into my instructions. If you had a prescribed format that you liked or brand style, I'd put it in here as your like static files. So like it always, these are your reference documents. So it says, oh, I know it needs to look like this inside of files. And then I'd say run it for that period. So active data goes into the chat section into here, and then your static data goes into files.
Perfect. Okay, I think we've answered most of the questions actually now. So for anybody else, if you've got any final questions that you wanted to ask, feel free. But if not, we'll send across the recording with the slides and the cheat sheet of prompts within hopefully 24 hours. So just keep an eye out for that, and just look out for the next session. So this will be on a monthly basis. So you'll get a monthly email with the upcoming events as well. So now you're registered, you're in the loop. You'll always hear about the future sessions that are coming up. If you've got any questions at any time, just give us a shout. And if you would like a one-to-one with Peter, if you're a CFO or finance director looking to adopt AI in your finance team, Peter can also help out with that. So feel free to reach out to me directly, leo@core3.co.uk, or to Peter. You can see his email there on the screen. Thanks, guys. I hope it was useful. Have a great rest of the week.